welcome back to another episode of the Vietnam War with me, Mike B. Today we're going to kind of do a follow-up, one of the follow-up videos to the video I posted yesterday about who actually served in Vietnam and the misconceptions and all that stuff regarding socioeconomic, volunteer versus draftee, all that stuff. Kind of got a couple comments that said I was misleading, which, I don't know, that you can look at it one way. Maybe I didn't clarify enough. I know I commented a little bit on it, but maybe that was... So we're going to kind of go over the whole, we're going to go over some more macro statistics and numbers, and then I'll kind of get into the whole draftee versus volunteer, quotes, air quotes, kind of conversation. So Vietnam vets represent, this is from historyworld.org again. Vietnam vets were 9.7% of their generation. So that's a pretty decent number. 10% of people that were in the baby boomers served in Vietnam in some capacity or the other. So this is an interesting number. And this will actually kind of go along with the conversation we're going to have in a little bit. This video won't be 20 minutes, so don't worry about that. So around 9 million military personnel served on active duty during the Vietnam era, August 5th, 1964 to May 7th, 1975. Okay? It's about 9 million people total were in the United States Armed Forces at one point or the other, right? So remember that number, 9 million. So 8.7 million people were on active duty during the war, okay? So the Reserves and National Guard would be the other 300,000 or whatever. So about 3.4 million, including 500,000 offshore personnel served in the Southeast Asia theater. So Vietnam, Laos, Cambodia, flight crews based in Thailand, that whole area, so Southeast Asia in general. Now here's where the number gets kind of cool. 2.594 million personnel served within the borders of South Vietnam from January 1st, 1965 to March 28th, 1973. Another 50,000 served in Vietnam between 1960 and 64, so kind of the advisory role, the small general buildup in those years. So of the 2.6 million people who were serving within South Vietnam, actually there in country, or Laos, Cambodia, which was, I guess, South Vietnam on paper at that point because it was a no-no. So of the 2.6 million people in Vietnam, 1.6 million, 40 to 60%, somewhere in there, either fought in combat, provided close support, or they were at least fairly regularly exposed to enemy attack. Rockets, mortars, sappers, weird little things, people breaking into the wire, especially in the Tet Offensive 68 and all that stuff, which is a pretty big deal. I'll be talking about that in another video. And then I was a little bit off on the amount of women who served in Vietnam. It was 7,484. Of those, 83.5% or 6,250 were nurses. And then the peak troop strength in Vietnam, so this is the draft, volunteers, you name it, was 543,482 April 30th of 1968. So that was the equivalent of like the surge in Iraq in 2007 and 8, where you've got the most people there and you're trying to just, turn the tide of this conflict or whatever. Now, I had a comment from a Vietnam veteran, I forgot your username, so sorry about that, on the video yesterday, who said that when he was there, he saw more U.S. prefix serial number or service numbers than RA numbers. What he meant by that was U.S. prefix on your service number meant you were a draftee. You were drafted, you were in Vietnam. This guy said he spent 19 months there, so probably 1967 to 69, somewhere in there where there was the most people, and the draft was really kicking up and ramping up in numbers. 68, I think, was the 67, 68, and 69 were the three highest years of the draft as far as numbers. And the RA would be regular Army, which means you volunteered or enlisted by yourself. Now, what we're going to talk about in here is when I say volunteer, I don't mean, yeah, let's go fight, like the Iraq and Afghanistan wars were at the beginning. Let's go, America, let's go kick some ass. Let's defend our freedom, all that shit. No, it really, what it boiled down to for the majority of people who enlisted, and given these numbers of 9 million or 8.7 million people who could have gone to Vietnam, and 2.5 million actually did. That's because a lot of people knew that eventually their draft number, their lottery number, which is a whole complex weird thing that I'll try to explain in another video how that worked. Their number would come up eventually, so they decided to enlist themselves, and that way they could choose which branch they wanted to join and sometimes what jobs they wanted to do. My uncle is an example of that. He was, I think, 1968. He was just out of high school or something, and he decided to join the Army and become a meteorologist. So obviously never went to Vietnam. And whatever, he did what he did. I mean, I can't really fault him for that. That's pretty smart. You don't want to go to a combat zone and potentially get killed for an ideological war. Maybe he had it figured out, maybe he didn't, maybe he was just lazy, maybe he was a pansy, who knows. But anyway, that's what he did. And I'm guessing a lot of other people did the same thing. By the way, he came from a lower class family. So at that time they were lower class. So just take that into consideration socioeconomically. But yeah, he enlisted and then decided to do an MOS and secure an MOS that generally you're not going to see a lot of combat. So a lot of the volunteers or people who enlisted actually did that. That's why there was a huge number of volunteers. So it's like 25% draftees, 75% volunteers. Of that, it didn't guarantee you absolutely a job, an MOS, military occupational specialty. It didn't guarantee you an MOS that would be non-combat. Sometimes you would sign up, and this happens today too, you'd sign up for like, doing this, journalist, pencil pusher, 42 Alpha, or whatever they were back then. Paperwork, clerk, you name it, and then in these years they might have gone, well, we really need to fill these, so you didn't actually get your slot for your MOS, so you're going to go 11 Bravo or 13 Bravo or whatever else, the 12 Bravo combat engineer. So that's kind of explaining why that number was so big, 75% of Vietnam veterans enlisted. Now, I wasn't trying to mislead anybody by saying that. I was just kind of throwing out the numbers so I could build on it, which is what I'm doing in this video. So take that into consideration. That doesn't mean that there weren't a lot of people who wanted to go over and serve their country and thought they were doing the right thing, just like what happens in every war. That doesn't mean that that didn't happen and that wasn't a fairly significant number and percentage of people who served in Vietnam. But yes, quite a few of them did that so they could choose their branch and hopefully their MOS. So of the night, yeah, so if, we'll use that number. 8.7 million people were in the military. 2.5 million or 2.6 million actually served in Vietnam. So that's about a third of people, 28%, somewhere around there, of people actually went to Vietnam who were in the military at that time. That's where you get a lot of the Vietnam era veterans, which pisses a lot of the actual Vietnam veterans off because they didn't go to the country, they didn't deploy there, they didn't see combat, they weren't in the imminent danger zone, they weren't in that experience, rather they were in the military, which is cool, but they didn't go there, and that's kind of why you see a lot of them, and I think that's why a lot of actual Vietnam veterans wear the hat proudly and have bumper stickers and stuff, whereas younger guys like myself, I'm not really into that stuff. I mean, I was for a couple years after I got back, but it's kind of like, yeah, whatever. But now I understand a little bit more why Vietnam veterans try to distinguish themselves from the Vietnam era veterans, because just like nowadays, there's a lot of people like a Global War on Terrorism license plate, I see that medal and I'm like, okay, well, I got that out of basic training. But you want to show that you're special somehow and you contribute, even though you probably never deployed, which is fine. Like, I'm not one of those assholes that, just because you never deployed, you're a piece of shit. But it's the same thing with the Vietnam veterans. So take that into consideration. A lot of them did enlist. But it was interesting about the African Americans that the ones who enlisted actually, like a decent chunk of them, over a third of them chose combat arms, which is very interesting. So that was an interesting statistic that I learned yesterday. Through those numbers, not really learned, just kind of clicked. So, but yeah, now you got the numbers there. Hope that makes a lot of sense, trying to explain the little bits and pieces. I appreciate the feedback from guys who were there. So I'm saying to you, again, forgot your username, my bad, but you said you were interested in what I had to say, and then you were talking about the percentage of African Americans, which I'll do another video on, or I can just mention it here. The number really hasn't changed that drastically since 1960. At that point, it was about 11.5 to 12.5% were African American on the census reports, and now it's between 13 and 13.5. It's been that way for a while, so there wasn't like a super huge change from 1960 until now, which is why I used that number in yesterday's video. Anyway, appreciate you commenting. 19 months is pretty good, and probably why you saw so many U.S. prefixes is more than likely, well, they stopped using those prefixes and went to socials in late 1968. So that means you were probably there between, 65 and 68. And more than likely 67 and 68 is when you probably saw the majority of the U.S. Prefixes, the draftees, when you were in Vietnam. So yeah, that's what I've gathered. So thanks for watching, everybody. I'm really kind of liking making these because some people are saying that they didn't really know this stuff. And again, these are from what I consider reputable sources. You can disagree. I mean, we can have a source battle all day, but I think they're reputable and they're very consistent with other organizations and stats and all that stuff. So you'd think the Vietnam vets want to keep their experience and their statistics as accurate as possible. So that's why I use them. But anyway, all right, I'll stop rambling. Thanks for watching, everybody. If you haven't already, subscribe to the channel. And yeah, we'll be doing more videos like this. I will be doing gear videos when it warms up again. It's like disgusting. There's like 2 feet of snow, or like a half a meter for you metric types. About a half a meter of snow just consistently on the ground. The roads suck. It's really cold. I'll be doing gear videos this summer and stuff, weapon videos, etc., etc. So, all right. Anyway, thanks for watching, everybody, and we'll see you on the next video.